1982 to about 2007, the world was dominated by two publications, and winemakers made their wine toward these palates. So it wasn't just that people were drinking them, it was almost all that we could drink, because winemakers were making wine towards these people, which is why I wrote The Battle for Wine and Love, because there was nothing I could drink anymore. A couple of things happened. One is that there was a new generation of wine drinkers growing up. We didn't want to be dictated to, but also I think there are a few things. I don't know whether my book, I don't think my book really changed that, but it did happen at a moment where actually Robert Parker took on a few new people to review for him, which was kind of interesting because, for better or for worse, when people bought wines that Parker liked, they knew what they were getting. Now when you buy a wine that gets a good advocate score, you can be getting a bunch of different viewpoints, which is mirroring the fact that at the same time social media took off, and all of a sudden there were a lot of very different opinions floating around the web. So people are finding their own personal wine gurus and following them and asking them what to drink. Also, there's a whole natural wine movement that took off, and even though a lot of people will say it's really bad wine, there happens to be a lot of people very passionate about it. So in the New World, it is finally, it took a long time because the New World was total Parker territory, but even here in Argentina and even in Australia, New Zealand still not, but the New World is starting to make wine a different way, where big is no longer powerful, and there are other flavors that are allowed to come in. So it's in some ways people still have the same problem. The regular consumer still doesn't know what to drink. But I think they're going back to a more old-fashioned way of asking their local wine store and asking their local blogger. There's also something else that's really taking off, is that people, because of the internet, can buy wines all around the country. So they're no longer limited to their neighborhood store that stocks craft. Incredibly frustrating to me is that there are fewer places in the world that you can write about wine, that people, in the end, is very frustrating, still want to know what to drink and they don't want to read about it. And it makes a difference when you read about it. I saw a friend of mine who just actually finished reading Naked Wine, and he said that he started to drink wine, use it as a wine guide for him. And that created a whole different depth for his experience, which is going to be way different from me saying, Gabrielle, just drink Amy's 2008 Côte d'Or. And then you're just drinking a wine as opposed to having an experience. If I'm not given the space to write, people will not have that experience. It's very frustrating. I really resent being asked, well, what should I drink? Yeah. No, I want to give you the story. I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller. Come with me on that adventure, it will enrich you. And it's hard because when social media and Twitter has reduced everything in conversation, for 10 years up in Boston, I was doing very serious wine tasting. And when I moved back to New York to write, I just picked stories about things that I knew about. And at that point, I knew something about wine. So that was that story. That was the beginning of the story. The second part of the story was when I was writing the Food and Wine magazine official wine guide in 2000. I hated most of the wines that I drank. they had changed dramatically, and there was a very, very small part of the world that was still making wines that I could enjoy. So basically I couldn't enjoy wines from California, from certain parts of Italy, from most of Italy, from Spain, except for maybe 2 producers. Forget about Australia, I never could really drink those wines. And I realized that the wines that I could drink were the ones that were very naturally made, and they were mostly coming from one importer, Joe Dresner, who just recently passed away. And I started doing investigations. What about those wines made them interesting to me? And they had nothing added, nothing taken away. They were just reflective of the vintage. And at that point, I started spending a lot more time in vineyards. A lot more time in vineyards. And at that point, wine was a completely different story for me. And that's when I guess I became who I am. And my whole perspective was born out of trying to bring awareness about what kind of technology is used to shape wine, and how that kind of shaping wine is not wine I want to drink.